listening to the Pharmacist Answers podcast. I'm Cynthia, the pharmacist, and today you'll get your questions answered and your curiosity cured. There is a big difference between having stomach ulcers and having reflux, or what we like to shorten to GERD. GERD is Gastro-Esophageal reflux disorder. So gastro being your stomach, esophageal, that's your esophagus that runs from your throat to your stomach. Reflux is a word used to describe something in your body that flows backwards. So for your digestive tract, you put food in your mouth, you chew it, you swallow it, it runs down your esophagus into your stomach. Your stomach churns it up, sends it into your intestines, your small intestines, then your large intestines, and then out the exit. So reflux is a word that we use to describe a process that ends up flowing backwards. So the fact that the acid goes from your stomach and rises up into your esophagus and even into the back of your throat sometimes if it's really bad, that's reflux because it's going backwards instead of forwards. Is that like heartburn? Yes, heartburn is a type of mild reflux where the acid tends to bubble up, whether it's because you ate something spicy that set off that reflux trigger in your stomach, or if a big culprit of heartburn type reflux is overeating. So you overfilled your stomach because there's this flap at the bottom of your esophagus. So you swallow food and the flap opens, and then once the food goes through, it closes back. So then the acid that's hitting up against it can't get in. So if you end up overeating, it can stretch that opening to where that door doesn't close off the opening all the way, and so then some acid can escape. Or if your stomach is so full and it ends up holding that door open, you can have acid escaping. So there's usually some kind of mechanical reason that that flap isn't closing back all the way that's allowing the acid to bubble up. In chemistry, when you put something in acid and the acid would just bubble and like do all this crazy stuff, that's kind of what goes on in your stomach. And the lining of your stomach is built to be able to withstand that. One, because the lining of your stomach actually produces the acid. So if it's making the acid, then it's going to be able to stand up against the action of the acid and not be injured. But the rest of your body, like especially your esophagus, is not built to handle that kind of acid. If it ends up refluxing back up and getting past that door that's supposed to kind of keep it separate, then the lining of your esophagus will feel irritated because it's not intended to handle that strong of an acid. Your saliva is acidic. We swallow acidic things and fruit and juices and spicy foods and things like that, but that's nowhere near the level of acidity that is in your stomach. So that's reflux. Ulcers, on the other hand, is an actual injury to the lining of the stomach. So that happens specifically in the cavity of the stomach. So where the lining of the stomach is able to withstand the action of the acid, if that lining gets injured and the acid is able to reach the layers of that stomach muscle, which your stomach, they work like muscles. They're just involuntary muscles, but that's a different story. So if the lining of the stomach that is protected against the acid ends up getting injured for any reason, then the underlying layers of that stomach wall are not able to stand up against the acid, and the acid will actually start injuring it. So it's kind of like your skin, how your skin is a protectant, and your skin can handle all kinds of abrasions and contact with all kinds of different substances and different type of environments. If the skin is peeled away, even the top layer of skin, and you reach that next layer of your skin layers, that layer of skin is not able to stand up against anything near what our top layer of skin can. And so same thing with the stomach. That first layer that creates the acid can stand up against the acid, but for whatever reason, it gets injured or peeled away just a little bit. Would that cause some people to throw up blood? Yes. it possibly would. Anything that has a job in your body requires some type of blood flow to feed it energy and then take its waste away. And so the lining of your stomach is full of blood vessels. So if the acid eats away at those inner layers and actually gets to the blood vessels in the wall of your stomach, then that blood's going to start flowing into the stomach and being in the stomach. And your body isn't really intended to digest large amounts of blood. So blood ends up being kind of weird in your intestines if it makes it that far, but a lot of times the pain from the acid irritating those open places plus the blood can lead to nausea and vomiting, and then the stuff that comes out can potentially be bloody because of that. So ulcers, not fun. Before you ever get to the doctor for them to stick the camera down your throat and look inside your stomach and see how your esophagus flaps are working and see how your stomach lining looks and all of that stuff, one of the easiest ways to know if your stomach pain is from ulcers or reflux. Sometimes for people, it could just be one spot that's ulcerated in the stomach that can lead to this whole gamut of problems. So I work in a retail pharmacy, so when people come to me and they're like, I'm having all this stomach problems, blah, 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 can I get an antacid? And so I usually have to ask this level of questions. And the first question is, where does it hurt? Because reflux is going to hurt in your esophagus because that's where the acid is refluxing to. If it's an ulcer, it's going to hurt in your stomach because it's actually the lining of the stomach that's being hurt. The other thing is, does it hurt worse when you eat or after you eat, or does it hurt worse when you're hungry? Because the interesting thing about ulcers is that if you have food in your stomach for the acid to work on, then the acid kind of doesn't bother the lining of the stomach as much. But if the only thing in the stomach is the acid and then the lining and there's no food in there, then the acid is going to end up working on something. And so it's going to end up working on the stomach and irritating and causing pain in those ulcerated places. So where with reflux, you end up getting reflux because of something you ate. If you add acid to acid, then you just end up with more acid. So spicy foods, acidic foods can trigger reflux. Overeating can trigger reflux. So it's usually, I eat something and then, oh my goodness, I have heartburn. Or for some people, they end up with a major reflux flare. Like I said, for major reflux, like it'll reflux all the way up and bubble up into the back of your throat. So people with really bad reflux will actually end up hoarse. And their voice will be hoarse because their vocal cords have been irritated and corroded by the acid that's flowing all the way back up. And so that kind of pain happens after you eat. The other thing about reflux is that when you lay down flat in your bed to go to sleep, you don't have gravity holding the acid down in your stomach when you're standing up or sitting up straight. So then the acid kind of gets to like puddle out. So if that flap isn't closing good, then it can puddle up in your esophagus. And so reflux for some people ends up being really bad at night because something has made that door defective and it's not closing all the way. So you're getting a little bit of leakage and it leaks more because you're flat and gravity isn't helping you keep it down. So reflux hurts after you eat or when you lay down to sleep. Ulcers will hurt more all of the time, but specifically when your stomach is empty. So the interesting part is that the treatment for both is the same because the way that you fix reflux is to control the acid. The way that you get ulcers to start healing is to turn the acid off so that wall can heal before all of this acid starts flowing around again. So usually people with ulcers and people with reflux will like drink gallons of over-the-counter antacids. So like your liquid antacids, Maalox, Mylanta, or they'll eat Tums and Rolaids like candy just because those things are bases. And so from basic chemistry, you put an acid and a base together and they kind of neutralize and find some happy place in the middle. And so when you have that pain, the first thing you want to do is try to neutralize that acid. But the downside is as soon as that basic and that neutralized solution starts moving on through your digestive tract and moves on into the intestines, and the stomach just produces more acid. So then you have to take more base to try to neutralize it. And so that's just kind of a perpetual cycle that it's like, okay, I've now taken 20 Tums in a couple hours to try to keep the acid controlled. So that's usually a quick fix, but it's not going to be something that is going to be long term. All acid medications at this point, you can actually get over the counter. With ulcers, you need to know that there's an ulcer there because the doctor needs to watch it, because anytime something starts manipulating and changing the cells of a certain part of your body, it becomes a higher risk for cancer. The same thing with the esophagus, as those esophageal cells end up being corroded so much with the acid, any changes in those cells can eventually lead to cancer. So it's not like, okay, I know what I've got, I'm just going to go treat myself and not worry about it, not tell anybody, because you never know what kind of cellular changes are there, and a doctor needs to be able to check it out, see what's happened so far. A lot of times it's reversible, but if it's not, then a doctor has to monitor it. But there's two types of medications that turn off the acid in your stomach. One class is called the histamine 2 receptor blockers, and the other ones are called the proton pump inhibitors. The H2R blockers are like Zantac, Pepcid. They were over the counter a long, long time ago, and they can work to start turning off the acid within 30 minutes. The proton pump inhibitors are the newer ones, so the Prevacid, Prilosec, the Nexium that's gone all over the counter now in recent years. Those can take up to 2 weeks to actually turn the acid off. So it's not like, oh, I got heartburn, let me take my Nexium, because that's not going to actually get the results that you want. I will see y'all next week. Bye!
Thanks for listening to the Pharmacist Answers podcast. The pharmacy is now closed. You can post your questions and comments on our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/pharmanswerspod. Or you can email the show at pharmacistanswershere@gmail.com. You can tweet me or message me on Twitter @SinHendrix. You can find the show notes at pharmacistanswershere.wordpress.com. Pharmacist Answers broadcasts live on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 9:02 a.m. Eastern Time on the Periscope app. You can follow me @SinHendrix or view in your web browser at periscope.tv/SinHendrix. See you next time on the Pharmacist Answers podcast.